Hi everybody, I'm Virginia from British Fencing. I am the participation director here, and I also have the great privilege and honour of being involved in the wonderful project that is Muslim Girls Fence. And I'd like to introduce you to my colleague.
Hi, I'm Alia and I work at Maslaha and I'm one of the partners also on Muslim Girls Fence.
Fantastic. So Alia has joined us today so that we can have a conversation around a very exciting new film and resource that the project has put together to talk around mental health and young Muslim women and young Muslim girls, which we'll touch on in a moment. But before we go into that, we are going to give you a bit more information and a bit more background for anybody that hasn't heard about Muslim Girls Fence and doesn't know anything about the project. So Alia, can you give us a bit more information about what Muslim Girls Fence is, please?
Yeah, Muslim Girls Fence is a project collaboration between the incredible British Fencing and also Maslaha, in which we facilitate at grassroots level in secondary schools, but also in community spaces across England, fencing through creative and physical means in which Muslim women get to explore issues of things like Islamophobia, racism, sexism, but again through that bringing that physicality of fencing, and then creative sessions like poetry, zine making, art. And yeah, we're really excited to share it. I guess the backbone and what of that is our coaches. And our Muslim Girls Fences coaches are also incredible. They range from the age of 18 to 60. They're like all brilliant people. Some of them have backgrounds from being professional fencers, and some of them are community leaders. Some of them are young people who participated in Muslim Girls Fence as a young person and now are qualified Muslim Girls coach fencers. And you'll hear a bit more about in the film the sense of community and sisterhood they have as young people who participate in Muslim Girls Fence. But what's really beautiful is the coaches have that as well. There's a real sense of community, collaboration, sisterhood, learning, and that's been really a privilege to get to work with British Fencing to do that, but also particularly with the coaches.
And I think it's probably fair to say, isn't it, with our workforce, we have the mixture that we have, and the learning across the board is incredible. So we've got the likes of Mercedes, Yvonne and Binny, who are fencers, fencing coaches, and have come into the project to really support it in the geographical areas they work in. And then the other side of it, you've got wonderful coaches such as Nalette, for example, and coaches across London who have come into it because they do some incredible work in their communities, providing opportunities for young Muslim women in particular to be active. So we see this kind of real learning across experiences and sharing knowledge, etc. Would you say you've seen that as well through some of the work you've been involved in?
Oh yeah, I've been really lucky. For example, Mercedes is a good example of that. She started becoming a coach when she was 18, and now she's worked on the project for 3 years. So that's been really incredible to see. And as part of that, 4 people in her who started in her community sessions have all now become fencing coaches. One of them is now delivered in the school, which you'll see as a coach there. She's also a mum who her kids go to a school across the street. So that's really amazing to see. And she's now going to help set it up in the school her children go to, a Muslim Girls Fencing Club. Then we also have someone like Nadia, who is a newer coach with us, who's now going to set up her own older women's coaching club for over 50s, because she's recognised the need in her community to want to do fencing, and her experience of being coached by Mercedes and being part of Muslim Girls Fence has really inspired her to bring her experience back into her community. So that's one really lovely example that's based just in East London, but you see it all across the country. And yeah, really excited to share.
I think it's probably worth us saying at this point, and you might hear us say this a couple of times throughout the discussion now, that we would really welcome any clubs, any coaches that might be listening to this today, to contact us if you think that you'd like to be involved in the project. We were always looking for more female coaches to support the project, to support the coaches, and vice versa. And because, as you'll hear from our conversation today, this is an incredible opportunity to grow your club. There's a few things that we're going to discuss in today's session, which will hopefully help you think a little bit about small changes or tweaks that you could do to make your club really open and really accessible. But also, what can we learn from you guys? Because we know there are some incredible coaches out there, and we'd love to hear from you. So if anybody is listening to this and would like to hear more, find out more, then please just get in touch with us, and you'll see our emails will come up at the end of this session as well. So wonderful. So we've talked a bit about our workforce. What's next? Shall we show the film?
Yeah.
Right. So I'll hand over to you to introduce the film.
Cool, sounds good. So the film is called Centering Muslim Girls' Mental Health and Wellbeing. It was co-directed by young people at Mulberry School for Girls. And it's about the importance of having creative, physical and safe spaces like Muslim Girls Fence in schools for their well-being and mental health. And it's asking teachers, but I think also we can ask ourselves as fencers and as coaches, like how are we creating spaces and learning environments that give Muslim girls the space to be fully and creatively express themselves.
Brilliant. Without further ado, here we go.
Issues affecting mental health is mainly because of social media.
From COVID time, it still impacts us today. Like some of us feel a bit lonely and isolated, and we have a lot of pressure from the exams. So yeah, it's sometimes a lot, like the world and social media and just people around us, and then also we're a bit growing up, so sometimes we feel like maybe people around us can be a bit oppressive.
No matter how many people tell you that men and women are equal, it's not, and that causes like a lot of pressure. Like I feel like as a girl, we have to do so much more to succeed than what a boy would have to do.
And as a person of colour as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think some of the main issues that affect black and brown girls today are to do with just feeling discriminated against, whether it's to do with their race, gender, thinking about where this sense of belonging can impact on their self-esteem.
Like some people might say it's because they hate Muslims or something like that. That just confuses you even more, and it just like makes you more anxious about what you can do and what you can't and what's expected of you.
Muslim girls who regular the job have it a lot harder because they're more likely to get like hate crimes or shouted at on the streets.
When Muslim women, especially young girls, especially when Muslim young girls have to go through these stereotypes that just get put in their faces, like, no, you're oppressed, you're not being treated right. Like, I think it does affect them as well. It does affect their mental health.
We've got lots of girls from different backgrounds, but a majority of them are Muslim. And it's really good for them to see things that are beyond their scope of what's everyday to them. So having Muslim Girls Fencing, an organisation that got the word Muslim girl, they can already relate to that.
I think the issue with having generic services is that it's not culturally sensitive enough, so thinking about the tools that you might use, if they're quite generic, they're not taking into account someone's culture, their religion, their race, the potential nuances that they might be dealing with. And if it's a practitioner who hasn't been trained or who isn't familiar with that particular culture, they're not going to know how to then work with that young person on that level. And again, it will leave the young person feeling marginalised.
So what we've learned, that the most important thing when it comes to Muslim Girls Fence is combining those three things of having a space where they're able to explore their identity, to like challenge those narratives and stereotypes about themselves in a safe and in a brave space, which is like creative as well. So that's what we really focus on.
I think Muslim Girls Fence is such an amazing project because you're working on so many different levels. There's the creative aspect, so you're using different tools, you're providing a nice creative space where they can get in touch with emotions.
So I've been coaching this project for over 4 years, and we've worked with a variety of different girls, but I think often when they come in they might be a little bit shy or have confidence issues, and usually by the end of the project they're really loud and kind of screaming and very boisterous, and it's really exciting actually to see them develop like that in such a short period of time. I think the cool thing with MGF is that we sort of mix everything together and sort of say you can be everything and you can encompass everything. You can be powerful, you can be strong, you can be feminine, you can be all of these things.
So I think one of the wonderful things that Muslim Girl Fence teaches is helping girls to feel confident to step in. And one of the moves is lunging forward, and it's about how do we own the space? How is it okay for girls to feel like I can step in, I can have a voice and I can be heard?
This is the world around me, but this is not going to stop me from being who I want to be and reach my own potential.
I think it's important to show young people that they can do anything and that kind of the possibilities are limitless.
Fencing really helped me because I was able to grow my confidence.
Creativity is very good for your mental well-being because it shows that I'm being creative and I'm learning new things.
The world around you will give you these boxes, but you don't have to fill them.
When we do our sessions, I feel like I can say what I want and not be judged. Like the teachers that are in charge of the sessions, they're very supportive.
Muslim Girls Fence is good that we can meet more Muslim girls who have the same ambition to fence as well. Because I thought, oh, no one else would want to fence.
A place for us to relax and feel safe, it's like a safe space for me to come into at the middle of the week and just make myself busy and forget about all the worries I have and clear my head.
The best support you can get as a girl in Tower Hamlets is support from other girls.
There's definitely a sense of sisterhood amongst other girls.
It helps your mental health and it makes you feel happy about yourselves.
I think it's really important to address their needs because there are so many challenges that they are facing, and if we can help them to connect with that, if we can help create a safe space where they feel understood on all the different levels, so that they feel understood from a religious perspective and they can connect with what religion means to them and what feels safe for them within that space.
People just imagine Muslim girls to be in the kitchen, cooking, cleaning and stuff. And to be a Muslim girl who does sports and stuff, I think it really helps because no one really expects that.
Just makes you feel free and shows boys what girls can be doing.
A project like Muslim Girl Fencing helps empower young women, especially when in this day and age there isn't enough projects and programs that are representing and empowering young Muslim girls, and especially in a society where we're often looked as oppressed and dehumanized often sometimes as well.
Yeah, and it definitely feels if I go anywhere and do something and I'm also wearing my hijab, it could sort of speak out against someone who might be Islamophobic or something, look, there's a hijabi doing something there.
Before, there was a stereotype that men could only do this type of sports, fighting is not for women and stuff. But I think that it shows that fighting can also be for girls and that we're breaking these stereotypes through this club.
In our workshops, we talk a lot about identity and safe spaces and being that you're not alone, that you are not the only person that is feeling maybe low or feeling impacted by media and news when something comes out that's Islamophobic.
I feel really proud of being a Muslim girl because it shows that I follow my heritage and follow my religion.
When we have our workshops, we talk a lot about one of the main words that come up for us is that we're oppressed, that we're surveilled, and that we're terrorists. And this high level of surveillance impacts, and this constant level of surveillance impacts our well-being. That is a heightened level of stress that the average person doesn't have to deal with. And it's so important that we create spaces for young people to be able to feel like they're able to express themselves free of judgment, free of repercussion of being potentially referred to things like prevent or having that level of surveillance, because they have that in so many different parts of their life and we don't want to contribute to that. And it leads young people to censoring themselves as well, because they have a fear of being referred to prevent. And this internalization that maybe the thoughts or the feelings or the confusion that you potentially have around your faith or your gender or all of those different things, that you are the problem and that you internalize that. And what we really want to create is a space to be like, there is joy, and there's joy and complexity and messiness and lots of different ways to be a Muslim girl today in the UK, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's what we try to create in our space, in our spaces, whether that's through fencing, whether that's through our creative workshop, whether that's through the politics of discussion and that open and safe space.
For people from minority groups, they struggle to feel connected and to feel understood. So it's trying to create a space where it's culturally sensitive and that they feel like that they're understood and people understand their struggles and what that might mean for them. So I think for schools to be able to have that, to be able to provide the space, the funding for training to happen, for young people to be able, for the teachers to feel confident enough in being able to approach students and to create that space for them to have these conversations. I think for lots of teachers, they might feel quite wary about what can we talk about, what can't we talk about, how will this be taken, how will the families feel if we start to have these conversations here. So, but giving teachers the confidence and the tools to support them, they'll then be able to open up a space to be able to talk to the young people.
And to celebrate all the beauty and joy of what it means to be a young Muslim girl, and the sisterhood that comes with that too. We do that through schools and also in communities across the country.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that. Another incredibly powerful resource that the project has produced. I also think it's really important to recognise within sport that to produce films and some of the other resources that actually, as you can see behind us, there's a model city there of Tower Hamlets, was from another MGF project. That's something that really only comes with the creative expression and the creative know-how that the team at Maslahah have and do exceptionally well. So certainly something in my time of being involved in the project that I find so wonderful and so brilliant, whether it's this film, whether it's Nobody's Metaphor, whether it's model cities of Tower Hamlets or whatever it may be, the ability to really dig down into what the project is beyond just fencing is incredible. So I think we hope that in that short kind of 10, 11 minute film that there's a lot in there, there's a lot to digest, there's a lot to take away and a lot to think about, and we're going to pick up on some of that stuff now. Ali, I'm going to ask you, there's so much in that video and there's so much around how young girls feel, some of it, as we were talking through the video, everything from some of the girls' perceptions about fencing. You were pointing out a couple that didn't like fencing when they started and now are loving it. You've got some that are really competitive. There's a real kind of mixture, and you've seen a change with some of those young girls. But you say in that film, you use the words creating a safe and brave space for these girls to come into, and that's something that's really important for the project, isn't it? Across everything we do, whether it's in schools or community groups. Can you thinking about people that are hopefully listening to this and watching this, these are fencers, we've probably got coaches, we've got fencers themselves, people that are just interested, want to learn more. What does creating a safe and brave space mean to you? What would make you want to go to a fencing club and then come back and back and back?
Yeah, I guess that's the thing with like this concept of safe and brave spaces, and we talk a lot about in the film, and they talk about that, about like being able to be us to be relatable. And Lubna, the therapist, talks a lot about it being culturally sensitive or culturally appropriate, like mental health resources. And I think that is something that we, as like, it might feel like if I'm not from that community, how can I make that a safe and brave space? But actually it's not about that. It's about for them, what they say is like the importance of being understood, is the importance of being listened to, and that enables them to feel confident. And like, I'm sure everybody here loves fencing, and I think fencing is such an incredible tool for not just young people, but for people of all different types of body types, of all different ages, of all different genders, religions, and races, to feel confident and comfortable in themselves. And so I think if we take that approach of being like, this is an incredible sport, as Lubna says, of being like, it's a space where you can literally take up, you're lunging forward, you're taking up space. So like actually naming that and saying like, this is such a powerful and creative sport. And that's a big part of that. And like Ibtihaj Mohammed from for in America, talks a lot about like how fencing democratizes and is a really equalizing sport, and it doesn't matter what you're wearing underneath a mask or feel like that is when you're on the piste. That's what's important.
Turning her into a fencer.
Yeah. But I guess what we do is we mix that of having the space for them to feel comfortable to explore their identity, to explore and have politics of discussion, at the same time of talking about that creativity and that physical aspect of fencing, the creativity in fencing. I think I'm going on a ground pencil, but I think that like the importance, if you are creating a space in your club, it's like, are you also able to allow people to have discussions with you and talk to you and feel comfortable to come to you if they have questions or if they don't understand? I think a good example of that is Asia, who is in Manchester. So Asia from Manchester, who is at the Four of Clubs, and she is 14 and she wrote a beautiful piece for British Fencing
in My Fencing World on the website.
It's so great, and she talks a lot about her faith, and so she started wearing the hijab, which is like the headscarf, and her coach at the Four of Clubs was really supportive of her, and like didn't even like, her coach approached her and was like, what would make you feel more comfortable in terms of fencing within the club? And that was a big part of it. So it was like she got to wear her trackies over her breeches, which it's something that like we wouldn't always think of, but actually for her to be able to wear her hijab, for her able to wear clothes that makes her feel comfortable, that really makes a difference. And that's not like a big thing, but actually for that young person at that age, as we know in sports, particularly when you're in that age group, no matter what faith or background you have, there is a drop-off rate for young women and young girls, and we want to tackle that. And I think fencing is a good way of doing that. So that's a good example of that. And then even the coaches advocating for her when she wanted to go to the BYC and speaking to the to British Fencing and being like, what can we do to kind of support her for her to be able to compete? Like, that's a really good example, and like a quite small change, but making her feel confident and powerful to be able to do that, and also tells other young people that they can do that as well and that they can still participate in the sport. We also have people like Binny in Birmingham, and what she does is she's spoken to Dawn, who's incredible, who runs the Leisure Centre in Ladywood, but talking about even the process of like, for the women who are coming into the centre, when they're coming for fencing, it's like there's a big massive poster of like a woman in a hijab fencing. Like that makes the difference to be like, okay, this is a place that welcomes people. So it's like thinking about the imagery that you're using when you are not even just recruiting, but like showing different fences and what that can look like, whether it's different ages, different body types, and all of those different things. And
would you say from I think the Four of Clubs example is a really good one, like you said, a really small change, but a subtle one that could have quite a life-changing impact on a particularly a young girl staying in a sport, and for us staying in fencing. You've touched on the creativity as well. One of the wonderful things I see in fencing is that kind of marrying of physical activity, being physical, but also being able to creatively express yourself, and something that is so different for any sport that I've worked with in the past as well. And one of the brilliant, unique points of the sport, we hear through the film, and we hear through the projects that we work with, that people can express themselves. As if you were to go into a club and if you were to talk to a coach, what does that mean really for a coach then, or a club that is trying to open its doors up and trying to really be more representative of society, so have a wider reach to a wider community, and depending where the community is that you're in, what can the creative side of the sport do to attract people, and particularly some of the young women that we're working with? Is that a selling point? Is that something that clubs can tap into?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the creative side is a really, really exciting part of it, right? And it's like it's such a unique sport, but it's also a sport that sometimes feels quite like, whenever we talk about it with the young people, the first thing they always say is like, I don't know what fencing is, or I've only seen it on telly or in the Olympics. And then they also associate it with like, it's quite a posh sport or whatever. It was quite like a middle.
There's lots of stereotypes about the sport and what it's like and who it's for.
And so then that also to be like, actually, if you're like a really creative person, then more so like explaining it in that way, then that's like really attractive. And we were talking during the film about the two young people who were speaking together as like a little tag team. They also really didn't want to do fencing at the beginning. They were like, why are they making me do this? Why do I have to put this mask on? Blah, blah. But then actually by the end of it, they really loved it. And I think it was also because we framed fencing as like, well, this is actually just like quite fun way to express yourselves. It's quite a creative thing. And also it's fun and young people aren't really always allowed to be silly and have fun in their bodies in that way and feel powerful in their bodies. And I think that when we talk about fencing, we often talk about like embodiment, creativity, and feeling powerful. And I think that that's like a really beautiful thing that fencing gives to lots of people. So I guess talking about that, but then also talking about, we work with a lot of the young people we work with also are neurodiverse. And so it's like also like talking about it in terms of like problem solving. Like, this is a really nice way of you thinking about, how do I react to people? How do I problem solve? And so I think that those are like, regardless if you're going to continue to be the next Tower Hamlet, it's also equally as important about, you're getting life skills out of this, of being like, you're learning to problem solve, you're learning to do teamwork, you're meeting new people. And that's really beautiful and nice thing. I guess the creative side is like also inviting us into your spaces. We want to learn from you. Yeah. And I think that sometimes it feels like in the community side of things, which I've mostly worked in, of being like, oh, we're just here to like have fun and to be, but actually like for some of them, they're really disciplined and want to like compete, but they're unsure about what that route looks like or what that could potentially look like too.
Yeah, and I think that's something we discuss a lot in the project, and we want to do more of, where we know there are fantastic clubs right across the country. We're very fortunate to work with a very small group of absolutely brilliant fencing coaches, and we want to reach out. We want to work with more clubs, and we want to work with more coaches, more female coaches that can support this. Now, I'll say, if you're sitting on this corner, you're a guy and you're watching this and going, well, I can't coach on this because I'm not a woman, then it doesn't matter. If you have an interest, if you think there's somebody you know or your club could really play a role in supporting the growth of some of these fencers and help support them go into that next phase, and you're interested as a club, then please do get in touch and just ask us questions. We are here to answer those questions. Obviously today's webinar isn't live, so there's no chat function, but you'll see our email on here. So we would welcome any conversations or questions you might have about how you and your club may be able to get involved, because there are some incredibly brilliant young women and girls that we are working with and have worked with over the years. And I think, Alia, you said, there's often generally in women's sport perception that women will take part purely for the social and for the fun side of it. But I think one of the ladies I met in the East London project years ago, the first thing she said to me was, I want to go to the next Olympics. So it's, there is an ambition from a lot of them to want to be able to compete. So how can we create those opportunities, and to be able to work with more clubs to do that would be brilliant. So please, do get in touch with us if you're interested.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like sharing that knowledge from like both sides of like all the different parts of the British fencing community, in the fencing community, is that like, I think for some of the young people we worked with, they are worried, or they find like a barrier is that there's assumed knowledge about fencing. Like, it's like, if I talk about breaches to them, they wouldn't necessarily know what that is. So I guess it's like things like that, of being like, oh, so what's the process when it comes to like someone coming in? Like, is there a safe and brave space for them to ask like all of the questions, none of the questions, but also for us to think about what it was like when you first started fencing and what kind of helped you to feel confident.
Yeah, fantastic. So we've talked about imagery. We've talked about imagery that is representative, and we gave the example of Birmingham and the fantastic over life-size pull-up banner of Binny, our coach up there, but says a lot. As you walk into that space, you immediately think, okay, this could be for me. We've talked about being welcoming, being able to come and ask questions and ask for support. Is there anything else that we haven't covered at all from a point of view of what's going to make you go back, Alia, and make you join that club and want to go back week on week? Is there anything that we've missed at all?
We talked about relatability.
We haven't talked about relatability.
I guess that's like part of it. It's like, what's so great when we talked before, we showed the film about Mercedes, who is like a young person from the fencing community, but also from London. She was actually working with a lot of people her first project was as part of that, actually. And it was in a library, and it was actually with older women. So a lot of people who were up, but it was like, and she's also not from the Muslim community, but she was still relatable in that she was meeting people where they were at, listening to them. Also, again, like letting go of that like assumed knowledge about fencing. Yeah. And I think that that's important. It's like, you don't have to necessarily be from the community, but what you have to do is understand somewhat what like's going on in different parts of the community. Like, I can go up to Doncaster where there's like great projects for Muslim girls fencing. I'm not from Doncaster, I'm from London, but I can still like listen and learn from them. And I guess it's like that process of being like regardless if the dynamic is a coach or a participant. Like, this is like a learning relationship with each other, and we have like so much to learn from each other.
Huge amount.
And that's like, I guess, that feeling understood, which we all want to do, right?
Yeah.
Feeling like we can relate to each other, and that's that constant thing is really important. And I think that British fencing do loads of stuff around like that, about like anti-racism, but also like how are we trying to break down barriers in fencing, and that's just not just like within the Muslim community, where it's like, yeah, all the different communities.
And I think in the 8 years the project has been running now, and the project continues and will always evolve and make sure it is meeting the needs of the individual communities that we're working in and the people involved in those projects. And I think there's a couple of things I'd suggest, like strongly recommend you check out. We've pointed out this model behind us a couple of times. If you go onto the Muslim Girls Fence website, under the outputs area, and you'll see a video for the Tower Hamlets. It's about 6 or 7 minutes long, and it is incredible. Another really powerful resource that Maslahah led on, that really brings together what that particular project in that community and what fencing was doing for those women, but how it was helping them, but making sure that they realise that there is a space you absolutely can have a voice, and you should be pushing for what you need in your community and the changes you want to see. So if you want to know more about that model behind us, then take a look on the website. So Alia, is there anything else at all that we want to pick up or cover off in this session?
Yeah, I guess we're talking a lot about like access to the sport, which is really great and really cool. And I think what a beautiful thing that Muslim Girls Fencing does is it gives access to people to get into fencing and to learn more and to participate in fencing. But I guess the dream is that, you know, here in the UK, we have our own like Taj Muhammad, like that's the dream. But it's like, what do we need to in order to do that? And that's not just starting at a club, but I guess what does it look like to support somebody throughout that journey to have retention in like the sport? And I guess that British fencing have done so much work on that.
Yeah, but I think that's a really good point. We for us, it's really important to success in anything that we do in our what we call our projects and program space and our social impact work, which includes our work with Maslahah and Muslim Girls Fences. It's not mass numbers. We're not looking at thousands, hundreds of thousands of people coming through a program. We're looking at really over quality, over quantity, and with that, for us, a really good indicator is retention. So we tend to look at anything 60% retention rate is really good. So we work that out based on if you've got a block of 10 sessions, people have attended at least 6 of those 10. So they've come back week on week and they've enjoyed that. So a minimum of 60%. And we've always sat, certainly with MGF, has always sat around about that 60% mark. We have lots of data on it. We can drill down into that data around age and further demographics. But that happens because of the investment from the coaches, the investment and the time from the coaches to do all the stuff we've talked about today. So understanding their audience, understanding who it is that's coming through the door and what their needs are. Really good approach, obviously, and there's probably coaches listening to this, but it's about the person coming in the door. So are we making sure we understand them? But we've also seen it in other work. So work in London with a partner, London Youth. And we have, I think it was nearly 60% of the participants in the recent work we've been doing have been non-white participants, which is fantastic. And I also know that over the years, we've had a really positive retention rate for young Black female in London who have been really well retained in programmes. Now that's nothing to do with what I've gone in and done. All that is to do with incredible youth workers who have provided a brilliant service through the wonderful sport of fencing, and they've made fencing work for that group. So breaking down some of those stereotypes and changing those stereotypes, and we still hear from particularly when we're running coaching courses and we're speaking to some of the new coaches, their perceptions of the sport and those traditional stereotypes that still do exist about it being a very white sport and very male dominated. These women are changing it themselves, and these young girls that we're working with are changing that. So we know it works because the data tells us that, the retention rates tell us that, and that is down to the wonderful work from the coaches, the youth workers, the partners that we work with to make sure that they're delivering the sessions that work for them.
Yeah, and I really like that about making it work for them and adapting it. And I think the great thing about fencing as a sport, and when we're talking about creativity, is that you're like reacting, you're making it work. And we saw that over COVID, like particularly with Muslim Girls Fencing, you're making it work. But I think, it's like we would love to learn also from our perspective, from the community, about like how do we make it work from what we're doing, whether that's like people come in to help us with, because we have our own specialized like core coach training for Muslim Girls Fence, so like how do we make it work as well to facilitate that? So that ideally we would have like way more Black women as coaches. Like that would be amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And actually a really good example of that making it work is, again, Mercedes, a legend, we're talking about it all the time. But also another incredible thing is working with Pat from Camden Fencing Club, who is a legend as well, and that she's opened up her space, and once a month a group from East London, 2 groups from East London come to use the electric kit at Camden Fencing Club. She's made sure that the space is only a women's space, that there's only women coaches there. She's like made sure, for example, that the windows in like the gym hall are like covered so that people can take off their hijab and feel comfortable and safe. To do fencing. And I guess that's a really great example of like an existing structure and infrastructure that works, that's really beautiful, and it's a beautiful fencing club, but also then like how can we come in and for it to work for us as a group. And I think I would love to see more of that, of like how do we, and then from there I guess it gives them the confidence to then be able to come on their own to maybe some more sessions to then like become more affiliated with the club as well.
I think we've got to say as well, these things take time. They don't happen overnight. They don't happen over 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. They can take months and they can take years, and that's because it takes time to create that space where people feel safe, where people feel that they own it, that it's their thing, it's not us, it's theirs, so they take control of that. And I think that, you know, what Camden Fencing Club is a great example of that, as well as Birmingham and how they've created this space in a leisure facility, a very traditional leisure space. I think it's also really important to acknowledge that some of these changes, they're fantastic changes, creating a separate space. We also appreciate that for lots of clubs, having this very separate space might be impossible because of cost, because of just the space isn't there and the size of the groups. But this is where I think probably if we were to say what are the things that could really make a difference, and we've talked about some of it already, but a female coach, I mean, that goes without saying. We need to have female coaches involved in this. We want guys to be, some of the male coaches to be allies in this and to understand it. It's equally important. We've got some great male coaches that we always discuss this with, that we've talked with about in the past, because they want to make sure that they can understand what they can do to create these spaces in their clubs. So there's a range of things that can be done, and small things, and you know, going back to the Forward Clubs example, a very small tweak can be something that can make a really big difference to somebody coming back or not coming back. And we know that for all clubs, retention is something that clubs want to see, and they want to see good retention rates, and they want to see people coming back.
And I guess I know we're asking not a lot, but we're asking lots of questions. But I think from how long Muslim Girls is, we've like got things wrong, we've got things right, and we're always learning. And I guess like it's being open, as much as we're expecting the young people to like come as their full authentic selves, to like make mistakes and to be open to learning. Quite an sometimes can feel quite an intimidating school. It's like equally, just take, that's the approach we always take, is like we're just going and learning together.
Definitely. Alia, thank you for today, and thank you for so we could talk about this all day long, but we will stop there, so we won't take up any more of your time. Thank you for watching this. As we said, this is a pre-recorded webinar. If there is anything you would like to ask, then you'll see our email details along the bottom of the screen, so you can contact us and ask us any questions. No question is stupid, so we are here to support. And if anybody wants to find out more about the project, then please go to the Muslim Girls Fence website, or just drop us an email. And thank you, everybody, and hopefully we will hear from some of you soon. Bye.